All right, video 3 of this English law series is to introduce the two types of interest in land that people had, the peoples and their connection to the land. And we begin with the island we at that time was classified or was termed Britain. And it was essentially at the beginning inhabited by the Celtic people. As we read here from chapter 1 of Borlasken's book titled Cases and Land Notes on Land Law, he briefly describes the people of Britain, the Celtic people, being hardly influenced by the invasion of the Romans from 55 BC to 407 AD, to next meet the invasion of the Danish, the Jutes, and also the Angles and Saxons, who were a little more forceful than the Romans were. And the Romans, I guess, were more accommodating to the wishes and needs of the people. But when the other group came in, they laid their foot down, apparently, with axes, of course. And this pushed the Celtics into Wales, up into the mountains, and also across the waters into Ireland. Now, what we wanted to discuss prior to the invasion of the Normans of the era of AD 1066, there was two different types of land interests that were inhabited by the people at that time, and we wanted to discuss those and explore those. So now to explore these two systems, I have pulled from many sources, from scholars and historians, with the help of AI, of course. Namely F.W. Maitland, The History of English Law Before the Time of Edward I or Edward the Confessor, The Concise History of the Common Law, done by Theodore Plunkett, William Holdsworth, the historian, and his book titled A History of English Law, Oxford's History of the Laws of England, a series spanning over 3 centuries, and of course the book previously mentioned by Borlasken, Cases and Notes on Land Law. If you want to know a little bit more about Borlasken, by all means research into him. Quite a astute, intelligent, and a man that really understood the system extremely well. And the devil's in the details. When you start knowing this stuff, you can read between the lines and understand what he's saying but can't say. Okay. Now, first, what we'll do is we'll just go through what the king system was inherently about. It was a centralized legal authority under the king, which was the king's court, replaced localized justice and customs with a standardized legal system. There was suppression of the kin-based justice by the royal courts, which managed disputes by kin and tribal assemblies, were directed now to royal courts that were managed under the king. Feudal obligations as a means of enforcing royal control. Feudalism linked landholders to the king, consolidating control and replacing tribal loyalty with obligations to the monarch. There was the creation of the common law. The king's courts established common law by enforcing uniform judgments, thus creating a consistent legal system that was applied across England. There was the role of the king in maintaining order and stability, meaning the king was seen as responsible for ensuring peace and preventing feuds, a role previously managed by tribal leaders within kin-based societies. The other point here is development of a centralized administrative structure. Under the king, a formal administrative network of officials and courts developed to implement royal justice, diminishing relevance of local tribe leaders in favor of appointed judges and sheriffs. Transition to hereditary monarchy as authority source. The king's authority was also grounded in hereditary rule, unlike tribal leaders who relied on kinship and shifting alliances. And lastly, the use of writs and legal instruments as state mechanisms. The royal system introduced official writs to initiate legal proceedings, which enabled the king's control over legal processes and limited arbitrary local rulings. So That's over a synopsis of the king system. Let's now compare it to the tribal or communal system concerning the agrarian use of certain areas of land. And that's really what it was. Britain and any other thing that was invaded from Britain was people no longer being nomads and creating settlements for the benefit of agrarian enterprise. So the tribal system, it was a justice based on kinship and tribal alliances. The tribe family or kin group were the primary units for administering justice and resolving disputes, and family tribal leaders, not a centralized authority, provided judgments and mediations. Additionally, collective responsibility and blood feuds, tribal justice relied on collective responsibility. Family members were accountable for each other's actions, leading to practices like blood feuds or vendettas to settle disputes and avenge wrongs. Oral tradition and customary law. Laws were based on oral traditions and long established customs, often unwritten and passed down generationally. Localized and decentralized justice. Justice was highly localized, with decisions and punishments varying by region and tribe. Local assemblies, such as the moots, moot courts. I don't know. I don't know if they got that moot court from there. So essentially, moots were meetings of the free man, and they were responsible for community governance rather than any central figure. Tribal jurisdictions had limited formal hierarchy or centralized authority. Tribal leaders, such as chieftains, had authority within their kin group, but lacked the overreaching power of a monarch. Leadership was more often based on consensus, family allegiance, or warrior status, rather than a formalized legal structure. Dispute resolution through oaths and ordeals. Disputes were often resolved using oath, which relied on the honor of the individuals involved, or through ordeal, tests to prove guilt or innocence. Land held collectively by families or tribes. Tribal land ownership was usually communal or collective rather than individual. Land was held by family or tribe as a group, limiting the individual control over it. Economic and legal systems interwoven within social ties. Legal rights, obligations, and inheritance were tightly woven within social structures and family ties. This meant legal and economic decisions were often based on maintaining familial stability rather than individual benefit. Another attribute, informal governance structures. Government structures in the tribal system were more flexible and informal than in the monarchical system. Leadership roles were often less defined, and decisions were based on the direct involvement of community members in local assemblies. Dispersed military and protection roles. Military or protection roles were often the responsibility of kin groups rather than a centralized authority. Each kin group was expected to defend its members and land. Now, this contrasted view assists us in how to sort out in our own minds the type of systems we evolved from, but mainly to work towards what it means to have ownership today under the king system. Now, Laskin, he puts it down plainly in a few sentences. He wrote, as he's quoting Jolfi in chapter 1 here, he states, as tribalism is more or less clearly seen to be the age when kindred and the blood tie govern society, as feudalism is that when land right determines privilege, duty, and status. So this is the era of the folk, an era in which nations have ceased to wander and settled life begins, to enforce the lesson that society has other ties than common blood, yet before agriculture and its gains begin to breed the conviction that a man's social and political virtue is drawn from the land he holds. Now, do we return to tribalism? Of course, not in the strictest sense, but in the sense of having a more of a communal group. No individual possesses anything. Everything is shared. And then amalgamate a group of elders, if you will, if they have the ability to be the speakers of the group, but who have the best interest of the group, unlike we have today, which is the best interest of profit. And as we know, profit, or the love of profit, is the root of all evil. And we can see it now as everyone individualized is working to a collective benefit, but trying to outdo the other by amassing more. The next video, now that we have the system prior to 1066 overviewed, I will say that, or as I understand it, Edward I, or Edward the Confessor, he was exiled to Normandy during a lot of different transitions between kings, between the sort of centralized Britain evolved king to that which came in from the Danish and so forth, or the Saxons, and whereby he would have had the ear, or would have been in the same grouping as William the Conqueror, who was the son of Rollo, and that thereby, before William even came to conquer Britain, as it were, he had a great understanding, or a basic understanding, of the two systems, and additionally the lay of the land. And with that, the next chapter we will discuss will be, or sorry, well, I guess we'll say chapter. The next series, video 4, will start moving into the conquest itself and the division of land interests that were held at that time. Please like and share, subscribe if you haven't already done so. You know the drill. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me.